excited about today. This is Teaching Tips Thursday, and I am joined by Miss Jeana Mudd, who, if you follow Master Books at all, if you've gotten a catalog or you've seen any advertisements, you'll know that her family has appeared throughout the catalog. Some of my, let's see, this was one of those custom shots of her daughter jumping out of a box. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to capture the Master Books in Action shot that Jeana is so good at doing. But I want to also talk about a conversation that we had that I think spills over into homeschooling. So thank you, Jeana, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. This is a pleasure.
It's a little nerve-wracking, right? For the coming on live in front of what, 17,000 people?
It is very.
And you live, you're in the Pacific Northwest, right? And were you born there?
No, born in Colorado, but kind of raised between Southern California and Las Vegas for most of my growing up years with my parents. And we've lived, we served at a youth camp in Virginia right shortly out of high school, and that's where I met my husband. And we got married and continued to serve there for a year. The Lord took us to Minot, North Dakota for 7 years, and then opened the doors for us to come and be here in northern Idaho. So we're way at the top of the state of Idaho.
Awesome. And how many children do you have?
We have 6 kids. My oldest is just about ready to turn 12, and my baby's just about ready to turn 3. So
wow.
6 in between. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have all the stress of homeschooling with babies and littles in the house, and then coming into also the kind of the hormone phase of teens.
We have had some conversations about that recently. So that will be a new avenue, and we're kind of, we still have babies in the house. It's not the same as the newborns and the infants, but the toddlers are still around and active and want to be a part of things. And so, we're still in that busy stage of littles.
Yeah. Now, so your Master Books testimony is interesting. You are familiar with Answers in Genesis and the creation science and all of that. How did you discover Master Books?
So we were trying to talk and think about this. I had gotten the Answers in Genesis science, and my mom found Principles of Mathematics, and she sent it to me. And I think my son was like maybe 4 or 5. I don't know. I mean, he was way too young to be using it, but she found it, sent it to me, and I read through it and thought, this is amazing. I'd never seen anything like that before for math. And just reading through her front understanding of math and a biblical worldview. And I thought, this is it, this is amazing. And so I think between, having the Master Books on the spine, having it published through you, and then Answers in Genesis, the dots started to click that, there's Master Books, and they're producing homeschool material. And so eventually we kind of, I can't pinpoint an actual time that I remember, but I believe it was between those two things that drew our attention over there, and then we jumped on board with the math, and then everything just flew from that point on. Once we started, it's just once you know what's in these books, it's hard to, I don't know, we can't go anywhere else. At least for us, we couldn't go anywhere else. So we just love everything. Yeah.
Well, and I think your family fits the demographic perfect, because Kristen, my wife, who was involved in the development of Master Books, the curriculum side, and still plays a big role in that, a lot of the friction points that we've had over the years come from having 9 kids. And at one time, we had 4 and under. And she was homeschooling like 5 kids at the same time that we had all of those. And we have one that we adopted that had special needs. So our house was just crazy. We were running a business. We were serving in ministry. And you want to do all of those things and homeschool. And those challenges are, how do you remove as many friction points but still give a quality education, a richness? And so your family, I think, your husband he does contracting?
Yeah, my husband does construction work, yes.
So that's time consuming, plus family, plus everything else. I think that's like the perfect fit of, okay, life is crazy, but we still hold this to be important. And so we're going to homeschool, but we need solutions that allow us to be the family that we want to be.
Yeah. And as more kids come on to actually needing to do more work through books and more hands-on schooling, and the older ones, it gets more intense as you get into the upper ages. You can't do it all, in the sense that some of these box curriculums have. They're so time consuming or so teacher intensive, or the stack of materials for the teacher is greater than the stack of materials for the student. And you think, that's so overwhelming. And so, yeah, I mean, that was just another huge blessing as we've gotten into Master Books and we're adding more kids into the mix, that it's doable. It doesn't take up from morning till night. You still have so much freedom to explore your interests and the loves and go exploring and do other things as well to continue that learning outside of the book. So yeah, we love it for that as well.
So I came across Brittany, my daughter, is a publicist here. She was going through Instagram. I don't do a lot of Instagram, and she was going through Instagram, and I think this has been almost over a year ago now. And she came across, I think, a post that you did. Might have been Jennifer too. They were really excited about the photos that you were doing. And it really captured kind of that natural, organic feel that we wanted. And your family translates really well in pictures and all of that. And so you were very gracious in allowing us to be able to use your photography and your family's photos and whatnot. So the pictures that you've got, and so many people that see the pictures. There's one that I have that is my favorite, and it's your daughter on a stool, hanging in an odd way, doing her schoolwork. And yeah, so you've been able to capture these really cool shots. So for everybody that's in the group, I wanted Jeana, I'm sorry, I know I'm going to say it wrong. I wanted Jeana to be able to come in and just like talk to her about photography. And what she said to me is, you're not a professional, right? That you don't think that you have very much in the way of technical skill and that type of thing to offer somebody. And so that's the question that I had was, I'm like, what makes a professional a professional? When we're talking about photography, so this is the second catalog that we've featured Jeana's picture on. We printed over 100,000 of these, and they've been given out all over the place. I don't even think Jeana knows this, but in this current edition of Answers magazine, her family and her schoolroom is featured in the ad there. So there's probably, I think that their mailing list is over 200,000. So here's another picture of photography that made it into that magazine. It's been featured in other Answers magazines, and we've used it for advertising. It just got put into, I think, it's over 40,000 boxes that CBD packaged. They used the picture of your daughter jumping out of the box with Master Books Curriculum. So what does make a professional a professional? Is it the training? Is it the equipment? Or is it an eye and a creativity to capture something that would engage people. So from a photography standpoint, what do you think, Jeana? What would be I'm going to say this twice every time, Jeana. At what point do you actually feel that you would be classified as being professional?
That's a great question. I don't know. Validation from other people. I don't know what would fulfill that ultimately for kind of the human standpoint. All I know is for me, that was something the Lord gave me a gift for. It was in a season where I had to let a lot of things go and choose kind of what hobbies to continue as a mom, right? And you can't do it all. A lot of things sacrifice or get put in the back burner for a season. And that one I felt like, you know what? I can still capture my family. It's something fun. It's something I enjoy. And so, and then Instagram is just an easy place to catalog it all. And so I just was able to share, and it allows you to maybe journal a little bit as you post the photos and keep this record. And so for me, it just, that was kind of the one avenue where I just kept up with a creative outlet, I guess, that I enjoy. And ultimately, I'm just blown away with what the Lord has done with it. It's a gift He's given me. I guess it's something I enjoy, and so I'm just blown away with how He's choosing to use the photos, and I'm so thankful. He totally directed that. There was opportunities along the way where there were times we thought maybe I should try a business, and we never felt like the Lord said, yes, this is the time for you, for me, to do that. And so I just thought, you know, there's so much joy in being able to photograph our family and our adventures and our daily life. And so I was just happy with that. It just fulfilled the creative outlet that I enjoyed, you know, and could still do as a mom. And so, you know, when you think about it and you just realize one of the moms posted in your comment this morning as far as this group, and she mentioned Exodus 31, and I thought that was such a precious reminder that the Lord gives the gifts and He equips, and then He uses that. He opens doors, and He's opened doors that I could have never imagined. I'm so honored and blessed that they would be used with Master Books, because we love Master Books. We can support Master Books 100% because ultimately you're turning hearts back to the Lord. And so it's all for the Lord. It all needs to be for the Lord. And so that He would open up these doors for these photos to hopefully encourage others in a way that turns their hearts back to Him and puts the glory where glory is due, to the Lord. So in context to the way I shared it, would you consider yourself to be a professional photographer? No, I don't know. I'm just a mom who loves to take photos. I don't, professional.
So this is the perfect setup for most homeschool moms, right? It is. When
you mentioned this, I mean, I just thought, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to glean and I'm going to learn so much, because it's true. It's so true.
Yeah, so many homeschool moms don't feel qualified to teach their kids, and continually ask themselves, like, I'm not trained. I don't have the training. And I have I've had experience, because I was a principal of a school, and I had 8 teachers that served under me. And then I've dealt with public education and schools and teaching throughout. And I've actually sat in a room where a teacher said he couldn't homeschool because he wasn't qualified to teach elementary students, even though he was teaching high school students. And you scratch your head, because he attended university. He has a master's degree in education, but didn't feel qualified because his training didn't prepare him for elementary students. It trained him for high school students. And I see the typical homeschool mom who doesn't feel qualified, even though And what is it? Is it a college education that would make her feel qualified? Is it validation? Is it the curriculum? Or is it more the eye and the heart for wanting to see your child succeed? So there's a masterclass photography right now by a professional photographer who's very well known, but she's like, I'm not a technical photographer. What I do is I serve the person I'm photographing, and who I want to make sure that I serve them by having their story told through the image. So she carries very few lights with her. She has a very simple setup. She said, I can barely explain what my camera is, but the idea is, I'm serving the person I'm photographing and telling a story through that. And it reminds me, like when I see your pictures, and a lot of people see them, there's one that I know we love, kind of through a door of the kids on the back porch. And the comment that my designer has said is, you just want to be there. You want to hear the sounds and smell the smells and see what's there, because it just captures this moment, right? So I think it's interesting that you don't feel qualified to give anybody photography advice, even though it's been distributed to thousands and thousands of people. And they decided to mow my yard right outside the window today. So you have the qualifications, I believe, to tell people, here's what I would recommend if you wanted to get good shots of your kids based on what I do and how I do it. So it's very interesting for anybody who wants to kind of up their game on photography. But for teaching, it's the same thing. I think we need to look at, an education doesn't make you a professional. An education may give you some tips so that you would know what lighting, maybe your lighting could improve things a little bit, but it's not going to replace the heart and the eye that you have. Experience helps, but it's still, you can't, if somebody doesn't have the heart or doesn't have the eye, I don't think they're going to capture the same as somebody who has a natural gift. My personal philosophy is, for educators, as parents, we all have that gift. God equipped you the moment you gave birth to that child. And I think it's fascinating that even giving birth, it's not like giving birth to a giraffe where they stand up a few seconds later and are somewhat independent. Babies are completely dependent. And I think it's because we also have to get into the mindset of, this human is completely dependent on me, and I have to provide every need that they have. And then somehow we lose sight of that about the age of 5 and think it's better to give it to somebody who's a professional or somebody more qualified to train them. So the story of not feeling qualified from a photography standpoint translates so well into so many people today who are homeschooling because they feel the need to, but don't necessarily feel the qualification. And from somebody who's worked with a lot of educators, I don't think that a lot of professional educators necessarily have all that either. I attended a public school, and I had a teacher who was incredibly good at teaching and making us all want to learn. And then I had other teachers who made me want to run from school.
Right.
They all had the professional training, but they didn't necessarily have the gift. And I think when the Lord calls you into homeschooling, and you know the call, you feel the call, that is the moment that you become a professional educator in homeschooling.
Yeah, and it brings us to a point of reminding us on a regular basis, on a minute-by-minute basis, on days that we need the Lord. We need to be running to Him. We need to be asking for that wisdom. And each new situation that arises, or the fear that wants to come in and cripple us or our students, that's that personal relationship that the Lord wants with us. He wants us, come ask me, I'm here. He wants to help us. He wants to show us and teach us and grow us. And so But it's that personal relationship of continually going back to the Lord that we get to experience and walk in because of this, and because of that not feeling qualified. And when we do feel qualified, sometimes it's an area where we can take it on ourselves and say, oh, I got this. I don't need the Lord. Or you don't think to go ask and run to him for help. And yet that's the beauty in it, because even all that equipping, it comes from the Lord, and he wants us to mirror that and walk that out, even for our children to see as well. So, it's such a precious thing that comes out of that.
And it's easy to get lost in the process too. We have to give them a diploma, and we want them to get college bound and college ready and ready for careers and all of those things. But the goal has to be learning first. We're growing them as individuals to grow into adulthood. And, we've talked about it in teaching tips before, of having a mission statement and a goal that you're working towards, and then you use your tools to accomplish that goal rather than being overwhelmed by the process. So kind of the teaching tip that I have is from a homeschool side, is the very fact that you begin homeschooling, it's not your education, it's more the heart that you have, and then the tools that you use and the tips that you get. But homeschooling is a process, and you gain that experience. And so to be honest, I don't think any of us are even qualified for life, right? It's so complicated, and we are so dependent on the Lord for everything that sometimes our fears are imagined too, that we just make this, if I put them in public school, they'd have all these people who are doing all of this, and they would be trained and have all that. And that isn't always the case. I don't think it is. It's hardly ever the case. I think in most cases, bad homeschooling is still better than good public schooling. But so that's a similarity there that I want to draw a little bit on.
As moms, we have the opportunity, we're with our children day in and day out. So we get to see the highs and we get to see the lows, and we get to see where they struggle and where they excel. And we know them the best, better than a teacher ever could, because they're only with them for a certain period of the day. They only see a small glimpse of who the whole of that child is. We have the privilege of getting to learn our children. And so alongside of our heart for our children, we love them as their parents more than anybody else on this earth. And we have that desire, and then we also are equipped, and which I believe the Lord gives us that equipping through living life with them day in and day out and learning them, so that we better serve them even in a greater capacity, because we've learned these aspects of our children just through being alongside of them day in and day out and living life. And so, the Lord has given that to us, and he uses it to grow us, and he uses it for us to help grow our children. And you just see that it's such a beautiful picture that the Lord, had designed when he had designed the family unit to be together and to grow together.
Yeah. So on the photography side, I would classify your photos now to be professional, because they would qualify as they've been distributed to the masses. Do you, what equipment do you use? What do you take pictures with?
So I only have a Canon. I believe it is like a lower mid-range body.
Okay.
I have a kit lens that I use that comes with when you usually buy a body. I have like a 30 millimeter and a 50 millimeter lens. So sometimes I'll swap those out, and that's it. A lot of people have cameras on their phones that are amazing. They really are for great quality. We don't have one of those yet. So in some ways that's a good thing because it forces me to pick up the big camera. I could see it easily, foregoing that if I had, a phone in my back pocket. But both offer great photos. And then I do edit all my photos. I have Photoshop, and so I run them through, and I don't hardly know how to use Photoshop, but I use like what they would call presets for your phone. So you can buy presets, you can buy what we call actions to play in Photoshop. So somebody's kind of already done the work of the Photoshop, and then you can just kind of play around. And to me, that's just part of the art of it. It's just part of the joy of making pretty photos and an art that is enjoyable for me. So those are kind of the items that I use.
So you have a tripod? I would assume that you set the camera?
I do. And so every once in a while, if I'm in the photo, or if it's a family shot, it's because we stuck a tripod or we found some random branch or, log or rock to set the camera on. But yeah, I guess I do use a tripod every once in a while as well.
And do you use a remote clicker?
Yeah. So I don't know if it came with it. No, I don't think so. But yes, then it has like a little remote click. So in the catalog, in that photo, you'll see my hand is kind of up and holding my baby, and my clicker is actually in my hand.
Okay.
So usually if I'm in there, you can usually figure out that I'm holding that somewhere, trying to be a little hidden, but it's there.
And now on Instagram, you'll see this a lot where like all of your images have a certain kind of color tone. Is that because you typically tend to use the same presets, and so they would have the same look and feel?
Yeah, probably. I have kind of a few actions that I pull everything through that maybe brighten the photo a little bit. I don't do major tweaking, but would probably be consistent. But I find in life, we went to the Grand Canyon this summer and arches, and the whole color theme totally changed. And so, there's so much reds and there's more vibrant colors down there. And I just think, too, when I go to the mountains, kind of the colors will change. So I think a lot of that, too, is just the beauty of nature around us. There's kind of these consistencies. I tend to like white and black. My kids die when I get paint colors because it's only white. So there's probably just things that colors that I tend towards that are in my home and kind of around us as well. But yeah, probably a little bit of the presets or the actions that keep it consistent to a degree.
Okay. So because you have a lot of white and a lot of black, the contrast and then natural wood tone, I would imagine people stand out a little bit more. Color and things kind of pop out of it.
Yeah, and I just prefer neutrals, and if I have too much color in my home, I throw it out in 2 weeks. So just for myself, I know there are plenty of people who love color and do it so well and make their homes so bright and cheery, and so that's the beauty, that we all have a different eye, and we have different things we love, and the Lord has given unique eye to each of us to each shine, for what He's given us, I guess.
Do you, when you take pictures of the kids, are they staged, or are you just kind of letting them do their thing?
No, there is a random time that I might ask them to sit in a certain location, but that's very rare. So that's what I would encourage. My kids have gotten used to me not requiring them to say cheese and look at the camera all the time. It's actually almost gotten to the point where we have to really bribe our kids to look at the camera and smile. That's what I love. So there are people who do amazing photos, and it's everybody looking straight at the camera. If I were to have somebody photograph my family for family photos, I would want them just to follow me around. So basically, I would be looking for a lifestyle photographer. And so that's what I always, I learned by looking and watching other people. I'm a very visual learner. And so I just found photographers that I loved, and I just looked at their pictures and studied their pictures. And so I got to the point where I learned to just let life happen. And I stand back. So I might be across the room and I just have my camera in my hand and I sit and I just watch my kids for a while interact. And then I'll maybe pick up my camera and I'll probably snap 10 to 15 photos all consecutively as I'm just observing whatever they're doing. Because when you have 6 kids, I mean, somebody could be picking their nose, somebody could be, in the middle of blinking. There's bound to have something, show up. And while I wouldn't say go delete all those photos that are picture perfect, I mean, usually there's something in there then that has everybody in a fairly normal position of whatever they're doing. So I like to just stand back and observe my kids. Most of my photos are them doing whatever they're doing, and I'm just kind of in the background, getting a few shots of them. So that's for the main part. Now, if I'm in them, that's the hard part about being the photographer, is not being in the photo a lot, but yet in life, I'm right there with them all the time. And so I feel like it is important, even if it feels awkward and it is staged to a great degree, because then I do have to put up my tripod and kind of jump in the photo. That's okay, because in the long run, when you look back on these memories, just to have you being a part and remembering that you are present and you were there with them in the midst of all that's happening. So, yeah, it doesn't happen as often, but I think it's important to get yourself in there with them. There's so many reasons we kind of will give or excuses to not get in there with our kids, but we're right there with them on a daily. And so to have those memories every once in a while thrown in is important too.
What about lighting? Because that's one of the biggest struggles I have using my smartphone or whatever, just good lighting.
Yeah, and I have to, honestly, our house is fairly dark. And that's where those presets and for me, running it through Photoshop can really help, because I will brighten a lot of my photos. Our house does have a lot of dark spots. And so I don't like, but I actually turn off all my lights generally in the house and just use the natural light. It doesn't alter the colors as much, and so I just like to work with the natural light as much as I can. So maybe some photos that I have aren't shared, but the memories are still there, but they're really dark or grainy because they're in a part of the house that just doesn't get good light. So I wouldn't say don't snap photos of the memory and the important aspects that you want to remember, but I just might not post those to share for everybody. But I do try and work on natural light, and then the presets or running it through the phone and brightening it always helps. But I think that's just another learning curve, is learning to work with the light. And so all your photos may not be, show worthy to those around you, but if they're dark and grainy and you're capturing a really precious moment in your family, who cares? Who cares if it's not, perfect?
Yeah. And do you use a flash?
I don't. I never use my flash.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
No, I try not to, because it compresses the photo. You lose a lot of the depth. So learning to work with some of the dark and learning that some dark is okay, and shadows, and that adds the contrast into your photos. But it's just a personal choice. There are photographers who love their flash, and they really can make a beautiful image using that extra light. So there's definitely a place for it as well.
It's kind of I've played instruments, and I remember years ago they were secular guitarists, but one famous secular guitarist went and grabbed another secular guitarist who was very famous, and he picked up his guitar thinking he would sound like that guitarist, and he didn't. He sounded like himself, and he said it wasn't all the equipment, it was the touch that he had and the way he played that made him sound the way he did. And I think it's figuring that out, that what is my style, what is what works for me through experimentation. And you kind of get that as well. So well, and if you're just joining, one thing that I really want to make sure I make very clear is Jeana has been very humble about, she didn't approach Master Books and say, would you like to use my photography? We approached her, and we've harassed her and her family a lot about it to keep getting pictures. And even, when I asked if she would share just a few tips, because I tried to get different photo shots, and it's difficult to be able to capture the picture that you did of Adam's chart. Now, we've sold a lot of that product. That is the best picture we've ever had. And it's not just, it's the product, but it's like the moment that the kids are using it, and they're so real and looking at it that, that kind of imagery really just makes the product come alive, because you're actually you're capturing more than just a book. You're capturing what that book does for a person.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of the lifestyle photography, is just learning to follow people around and snap life as it happens, as opposed to staging something, because that often does come through in the photo. You can tell if somebody's been positioned or if it just happened and you caught it.
Yeah. I think your image locked up. There we go. Came back. And in homeschooling, you're kind of a lifestyle homeschooler as well, right? I mean, you do the book work, but there's a lot. Your family does all kinds of outdoor trips and hiking and field trips, and very experiential as a family.
Yeah, I think that I love that aspect of homeschooling, that we're not confined to a box or a room. And so just translating that life is learning, and trying to blur those lines between the books and life and every aspect of it. And so we try to, I think maybe that's why I am more easygoing in a sense on the books, because I want it to translate into, it's not just this time that's school and learning because I'm sitting down and I'm opening up this school book, but I want my kids to realize that every opportunity, if we're having to cut and stack wood to keep our house warm in the winter, like we're learning, we're working through attitudes, we're learning how to work hard together. I mean, it's hard work to, and it takes a fair amount of time to accumulate enough wood. And if we're out on the trail, we are living the books. We get to see God's creation. We get to see the animals running around our feet. We get to see, that the mountains are different than the deserts, and each was designed by the Lord. And so just blurring those lines of, compartmentalizing, life into these boxes, but giving that opportunity that if we're always learning and everything gives opportunity to learn, that will carry through life, or no matter what comes their way. So yeah, we maybe that's part of the reason why I kind of just am a little more free when it comes to the book work and making it work for us.
Yeah. So I think the whole conversation translates really well for people in the homeschooling side of, if I feel intense because I don't have the training and I don't know really what I'm doing, especially if it's a first year homeschooling, that's the worst, that's the hardest year, because you're just kind of getting your legs and you're very conscious of what other people are thinking about you, and your kids, you're learning how to live with them 24/7. So some of those things can be very overwhelming, but the overall goal is really their learning, not necessarily perfection. Because
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so cool. So we were kind of getting the conversation going about doing this, and then I had a box delivered, and I put it up on my wall, so that's what I'm reading. But in our Master Books, you guys send the little thank you card, and usually a verse is written on there. But along with my verse was written, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And that was from Winston Churchill. And I just thought, thank you, Lord, for another reminder, another encouragement that, because and that would be my perfectionism that comes through to say, I'm not perfect, or, I don't know all the technicalities to share with others. Or I would agree with that photographer. I'm pretty much still in a box for the way I use my camera. I think there's so much more it could do, but I don't know all of that yet. So,
yeah.
And yet I would allow that to say, that disqualifies me, or there's so many other people who are more qualified to share. But yeah, you're right. It's the heart behind it. And the same with our children. We have that heart for the children. The Lord has given us their blessings, and they are. And when you are with them and you raise them, and they're people you enjoy being around, it's just such a joy to get to go through life with hand-picked people by the Lord. And it's all an opportunity to grow. We're growing so much as parents through it, as individuals as well, just like they're growing through getting to do this alongside of them.
When our kids were at your kids' ages, we kind of had this idea was we're going to parent them, and then they're going to just fly away and it's all going to be good. It's not. And being a parent of adult children is really unique too, because they're our best friends, and we continue to grow together, which it's kind of neat. So yeah, everything you experience now just gets magnified at a higher level. And then you introduce spouses and grandchildren and all of that. And yeah, it's you couldn't convince me that homeschooling isn't just fantastic, not just in the short term, but the long term as we begin to see the fruit of it. You mentioned something interesting about the warehouse crew. And, this is a tidbit as well for anybody. Sometimes in a warehouse, you could tend to feel that what you're doing doesn't really matter because you're not in front of a camera and you're not writing the books and everything else. And somebody started writing little notes on the boxes, just saying, God bless you, smiley face or whatever. And we started noticing how just those little messages, a little customized message, like brightened up somebody's day. And it has been such a blessing to see the responses of people who are like, that scripture meant everything that moment, And so for the warehouse team, when they're able to continue doing that, it's been a blessing to them, because even as something like that, just putting a little note in saying we're thinking about you and here's a message for you has been one of the biggest ministries of Master Books and serving families. So
it's the Lord. It's so cool how the Lord uses that. I mean, He's the author of all of that. It's such a joy to give and to be the one to share, and it's such a joy to be the one to receive. And yet He lines us up and sends us a verse where we're like, thank you, Lord. That was such a reminder for where I'm at. And I mean, only He could do that to line those up and bless both parties. It's so amazing.
It is. Well, thank you for joining me, and hopefully this was a blessing to some of the moms watching. And we thank you for allowing us the privilege of seeing your family in action, and especially the Master Books in action shots. And that it's a blessing for us to have that. And for coming on with me, I know that's a risk. So
I've been pretty nervous.
I understand. Yeah. So I appreciate that. And for all the moms, we pray that you have a blessed week, and that you know that because the Lord has called you to this, the moment you gave birth, he qualified you to train, raise, and prepare that child for life. And he says, for parents, train up a child. And that's because he equipped you with everything you need. The DNA that is needed to train that child's DNA to glorify and serve the Lord is built into the equation. And there's no need to farm it out to a so-called professional. You have everything it takes to be a professional, because God said so. So, all right, well, have a great week. Thank you very much, and look forward to speaking with you next week.